During this time of limited travel, increased isolation, and stressful media, we want to make the most of this time right here at home.
Let us be your escape from life's monotony. Allow yourself to indulge in your wildest travel fantasies and discover the constant beauty of this ever-changing world with the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. On today's episode, grab a pint, lads and lassies. We're heading to the Emerald Isle, Ireland.
Welcome to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. We're your navigators, Allison
and Regan. And today we are going to head on over to the Emerald Isle, Ireland. And we're going to go through all 50 shades of that green country. And but before we do get to that, we're going to have our icebreaker as always. So, Allie, what's your favorite seat on an airplane?
This is a tricky one. So definitely not the middle. That's the absolute worst. But
this is true.
I think I'm gonna, I don't know. I'm debating between the aisle or the emergency exit row. I know that's not a specific seat, but anywhere in the emergency exit row is awesome, unless there's an actual emergency, of course. But the amount of leg room there is just so fantastic. And I don't know, it just feels like you're not cramped in a plane. So I'm going to go with the emergency exit row, specifically the aisle. That way you don't have to worry about like anyone getting in your way, trying to go to the bathroom. You can just hop out and you're already in the aisle. How about you, Regan?
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with you on the emergency exit row aisle, especially on an international flight. You want to get all the leg room you can, and also you're going to have to use the bathroom, so very smart choice. But I'm going to go with just behind the wing on the right hand side, right next to the window. I just love being able to control what level the window shade is at. It also is a nice, if you have like a pillow or something to lean against that if you're trying to sleep. But generally I just like being able to watch the ground get smaller as we take off too. I just love having full control of the window at all times.
Yeah, especially when it's sunny. Like you want to have control over that window. It's the worst when the sun is just blasting in your face and you have no control over that.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. I can't tell you the number of times that like the windows that are awkward right like between aisles. And it's like, okay, who controls this? And then I decide that I'm not the one to control it. And then the sun is in my eyes and it's just not great. So,
no.
So yeah, it's great to control the window. But anyways, I digress. Let's jump right here into Ireland. And in our Iceland series, which you can go back and listen to, we kind of alluded to the fact that Iceland is full of waterfalls. So I'm going to start this episode off with saying castles are to Ireland what waterfalls are to Iceland. So where you'd see a waterfall in Iceland, you can see castles and ruins of castles. They're absolutely everywhere.
On to your question about flying, I've done a ton of international flying. Sadly, none in the exit row. Hopefully someday I can be lucky enough to get those seats, or first class. That works even better. But some of my tips would be try to get some rest. I know it's not ideal and it's probably not comfortable really if you're cramped in there, but try to get some rest because you're going to want to try to hit the ground running once you're there, or maybe take a short nap. The food on the plane might not be that great, but do try to eat because if you're flying from the US over to anywhere in Europe, it's usually going to probably be the morning. So you're going to want to eat. So that's some of my tips, and bring some music or some books to occupy your time because it is going to be a long flight. Regan, do you have any tips or suggestions?
Yeah, I completely agree with the getting rest. Like try to sleep on the airplane, bring a sleep mask too, because like Allie said, like it might be morning. So the sun might be coming up at some strange hour as you move time zones. So definitely come prepared for that. And then when you get to your destination, you're going to want to like hit the ground running and take all the time you can to see the sights. But I would also recommend taking part of your first day to adjust a little bit and maybe sleep at a hotel or something. Get on the proper time schedule. So find that balance between hitting the ground running and also taking care of yourself so that you're able to fully enjoy your entire vacation. Specifically in Ireland, then, though, there's a ton of sheep. So be ready for that again, just like in Iceland. But if you're renting a car, know that you'll be driving on the opposite side of the road from the United States, and the driver is on the opposite side. So that's something you're going to want to really mentally prepare for so that you don't end up in some weird accident situation or someone yelling at you. So then once you do get on the ground running, it's beautiful. You can't go wrong with anywhere you're going to go in Ireland. But some of the highlights that we have, so on my trip, I went to a town called Cove, and it doesn't look like it should be pronounced as Cove. It's spelled Cobh. And it was actually the town that the Titanic stopped at last before setting sail, which is kind of ominous. But the town itself is very cute, colorful houses up and down. And St. Colman's Cathedral is there, which I would say is possibly more beautiful than St. Patrick's in Dublin, but that could be due to the lack of tourists. Somewhere else was Killarney National Park, and that is, of course, in Killarney, Ireland. It's beautiful. There's some great hiking. There's some mountains. There's lakes. You really have everything there. But something that I would very highly recommend doing is touring Muckross House, which is this gorgeous ancient Downton Abbey Bridgerton looking house that's in the park, and it's beautiful. And the tour is awesome. And fun fact, Queen Victoria actually had a wing built for her in this house, and she insisted on having her own fire escape. And so everything to this day is set up exactly how Queen Victoria wanted it upon it being built. So definitely try and take a tour of that. The gardens there are gorgeous also, and it's just very, very cool to see the history in a place that's as old as Ireland is. Then something else that I would recommend that I didn't actually get to do fully, and like to the extent that I might like to, but Skellig Michael, and there's a chain of islands off the coast called the Skelligs, and Skellig Michael is probably the most famous one because it is the filming site for a couple of the newer Star Wars movies. And that's kind of how I learned about it and really wanted to go. But then I started looking into the history of it, and it is absolutely fascinating. Skellig Michael is this island that is in the middle of the ocean with whipping winds and crazy seas to get out there. In fact, most days, the boat trips that go out there don't actually get to go because they're canceled due to winds and rough seas, which is crazy. And that's kind of what happened with us also. You do still get to get a good view of them from Kerry Cliffs that are right there, but I can't imagine that it's the same. But anyways, the history of these Skelligs, there are these ancient beehive huts that date back as far as 1400 BC that were built by monks who actually lived out here in the middle of the Atlantic in the winds with the cliffs right there. When you do go out there, it's very dangerous because there are open cliff faces pretty much everywhere you go. So you have to go on a tour, and not many people actually make their way out there. So if you're a Star Wars fan, sure, go ahead and head out there, but please do look into the history of it too, because it goes way back, farther than I can even fathom than Star Wars. So absolutely incredible. Be very careful, not for the faint of heart. And also there's the Skellig Chocolate Factory nearby that has pink chocolate. Can't quite describe what the flavor of that was, but give it a try because it was quite delicious. Something else. So Adair Castle was probably the best tour that we went on of a castle. And they taught us so much about the construction of castles so long ago. The construction is so impressive. Everything that they thought of, from bathrooms to laundry to heating systems to protection, because this day and age we have, the Ring doorbell camera that we stick outside of our house, and that's our security. But back then they had to have an inner and an outer moat of their castle to act as protection. And they had this thing called well, what we called it was a death chamber. And it's if the enemies got past the outer moat, almost into the castle, there was like this bridge across the top of the entrance, and people would dump like rocks and all sorts of stuff onto their enemies, and that was like their form of protection, which I just thought was fascinating. And speaking of heating, they would put the servants in with the animals on the bottom floor of the castle so that the heat would rise up to the royals or the higher ups of society that were living on the higher floors, which I just thought, it's incredible the things that they thought of. So that was probably the best castle tour if that's what you're looking for. But from there, we moved on to Northern Ireland, which, yes, it's called Northern Ireland, but technically it's part of the UK, which is, yeah, sort of confusing, but it's an awesome place to visit and you shouldn't miss out on Northern Ireland. We actually had the opportunity to watch the national hurling finals at an adorable little restaurant called Granny Annie's in Derry. And hurling is the national sport of Ireland. No one gets paid to play it. They just play it for fun, which I think is awesome. And everyone gets super riled up for it. It's so cool. So we had the opportunity to sit in this bar, watch the hurling finals, Limerick versus Galway, and Limerick won. And it was just, oh, it was just so cool to be in the middle of the energy in Ireland. It's like our Super Bowl. Like how cool is that we had that opportunity. Also in Northern Ireland, Giant's Causeway is on the northern coast, and you've probably seen pictures of it. It's like these stone pillars that are all gathered up next to each other. And if you're able to go at sunset, it is probably my most favorite place that I went in Ireland. It's absolutely gorgeous and you get some really epic pictures, and it's just cool to stand there and look out and not see any land in front of you, and to think about how this was created. Like, our world is just beautiful. So that was really one of those awe-inspiring moments. Northern Ireland is home to another city, Belfast, and that's actually where the Titanic was built. And so there's an amazing Titanic museum there, and we could have spent hours longer than we actually did there. And it's fascinating. It's just like the 9/11 museum in New York City, where it's something that was so huge in the culture has a dedicated museum to it. And just the people that you're learning about, the stories of the wives standing on the dock watching their husbands go out to sea on the Titanic, and it's something that should have been such a happy memory, and now it's this tragic event in history. And reading about the people who were working on the ship and everything, it's just, again, it's one of those situations where you really want to learn the history of the people and not only what you read in your history book. You really dive in there and get the details and find an appreciation for people of a different culture. But moving on from there, so in Ireland, Ireland has a much, much, much longer history than the United States, even before the United States was even thought of long ago. And the people in Ireland would bring rocks from miles and miles away to build tombs for people. And they would stack them up in these dome-like structures. And they were so precise with their architecture of these, so much to the point, in the example of Newgrange tomb, they perfectly positioned the rocks so that the entryway was only lit up fully by the sun on the winter solstice sunrise. So it's only for a couple hours each year that this chamber is lit up. And that's just, I can't even fathom how to do that now with all of our modern technology, let alone back then. But they did reenact that for us. We all went into the tomb and they got like this giant light to put at the edge of the tomb and light up the entire chamber. And just to see the markings on the inside of this tomb from so long ago and the construction of it, I was blown away by it. So highly recommend going there to Newgrange tomb. But then, I mean, somewhere that even if you're not doing a dedicated trip to Ireland, you might have a stopover in Dublin. And Dublin's a super cool city. And I know that this is where Allie has a lot of experience here. So I'm going to throw it over to Allie now.
Dublin is where we have some overlap, so I'm going to take over this part. And Trinity College is a really popular place to visit. So Trinity College Library, it is known to have the Book of Kells, and that's a combination of ornate Latin text and intricate illuminations. It's a very, very old book that draws quite a few tourists. And if you happen to be like Regan and I, you might really enjoy the smell of the library. Now, that sounds kind of weird, but the smell is just so intriguing. It was just a bunch of old books and like years of history. So something that also Regan has touched upon before was St. Patrick's Cathedral. So this is a very popular place to visit. A lot of people like to go here, and it's very beautiful. But Regan and I are both kind of in agreement here that it is a bit overrated. It's nice. It's very beautiful. Highly recommend. But you can probably see some other cathedrals that are less packed with tourists and are probably just as good, if not even better. So, still recommend it, but don't get too caught up in going to St. Patrick's Cathedral because you can find other cathedrals that are just as nice. And speaking of St. Patrick's Cathedral, there is the River Liffey, which is right next to St. Patrick's Cathedral. So if you've been to Paris, it's kind of like Notre Dame, and there's the River Seine that travels through Paris. So similar kind of idea there. And then another thing that's right there in the River Liffey is the Halfpenny Bridge, super famous. Not really sure why actually, but it's just one of those things that's so beautiful. And while you're at St. Patrick's Cathedral or nearby, just give it a look, cross over the bridge, take some pictures, be a tourist if you'd like. And then once you've done that, maybe you're feeling a little bit hungry, you might want to hit up O'Neill's for dinner or lunch. And they have some delicious traditional Irish food that we highly, highly recommend. But if you're not looking for some food yet, maybe you want to hit up the Guinness Storehouse. So, any of our beer fans out there, you can take a tour. They have different events there throughout the year. I didn't actually go there. I wasn't of drinking age, but Regan, did you go there at all?
No, we didn't get to go there either, but I did go when I was of drinking age. And I know we'll talk about food a little bit later, but going to the pubs, like if it's the Guinness Storehouse or a different pub, O'Neill's, wherever you are in Ireland, yeah, they do. They have some really great drinks. Their ciders, I'm more of a cider girl myself. Their ciders, Bulmers, also very delicious.
Yeah, that's some good tips. So we're not Guinness Storehouse experts, but highly recommend that if you want to taste some beer and check out some of their events. So I was a little bit younger when I went to Dublin, and one of my absolute favorite things was going to Dublinia, and that was a Viking museum. It was so cool. So you got to dress up in Viking clothes. They had live reenactments. I remember seeing people eating like turkey legs. It was just like a movie almost. You went back into time to see the Vikings. You could go through the museum, walk through the castle and the grounds. And it was just such a unique experience. It was something that I think I'll remember forever because you don't really get to experience different Viking things unless you're going to maybe Iceland or Norway or some of the other countries in Europe that are up north. So it was cool to see Vikings and some of their clothes and some of the things that they experienced during those times. So if you're not really into the whole Viking thing, maybe you're more of like, oh, I'd rather go shopping and do some nice sightseeing and look at pretty buildings. Grafton Street is the place to be. They have lots and lots of shopping and beautiful buildings to see, as well as buskers. So some free entertainment is always nice. So that's like kind of our highlights on Dublin. Anything I missed, Regan?
The only thing that I would add, there was this place we went called Kilmainham Jail, and I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Jail is spelled Gaol. And if you've seen the movie Chicago, it was very Cell Block Tango because it had this huge staircase up and it had like 5 stories of just jail cells. And it was very creepy. Like you could feel the years of history of convicts and whoever else was living there. It was just very, very crazy. They took us out to like the courtyard where they would execute people and everything. So very spooky, but also really, really cool. So check that out if you're into that sort of thing.
So
Yeah.
if we're not interested in staying in jail, because I'm sure most of us aren't, Ireland has some awesome Airbnb stays, and I know Regan, you spent a lot of time in the Airbnbs. Do you want to touch upon some of your favorites?
Yeah, sure. So I know you've probably gotten the idea at this point that we are big fans of Airbnb here on the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. Airbnbs are not few and far between in Ireland. They're everywhere, and they are true B&Bs most of the time, where you do get some sort of breakfast, which is really cool because in a lot of places your host is making that breakfast for you, and so then you get to sit with them if they have a moment and talk to them about their local history or their story or anything. And one such example of that was when we stayed in Glen, and our host Catherine started telling us stories about the country's history that we had no idea even existed. She was telling us about these scandals with the Vatican, about how the priests and the deacons and everyone would get these nuns pregnant irresponsibly. And of course, in the Catholic Church, that's not okay. And so then they would sell these orphan children to America to then make money for the Vatican. And like, how messed up is that? And we never would have known that had we not taken the time to sit down and talk with someone who is very clearly very passionate about her country's history. And that was really cool to see too, the passion and the patriotism that she held for her country. And there was a really cool like medieval old stone house that was very like Hound of the Baskervilles, like Sherlock Holmes in Esketon. Like you could picture some fog around it and everything, very out of a movie. And it had this beautiful spiral staircase up in it and had guard dogs. It was the craziest, coolest Airbnb experience. And then another one of my favorites was in Northern Ireland. It was called Hilltop Hideaway, and we stayed on a cow farm. It was just really cool. You never know what you're going to find with Airbnb, and Ireland definitely has some awesome ones. So, but also awesome in Ireland is the food. It is the home of meat and potatoes, of course. So, Allie, did you have any favorite foods that you found in Ireland, or what did you eat while you were over there?
Well, like you said, it is famous for its meat and potatoes. So that was pretty much what we ate for dinner every single day. It seemed like everything we ate was beef and potatoes. But we did get to have some good paninis at a place called Insomnia Coffee Company. And that was a nice breakup from having just meat and potatoes. But Regan, did you get to eat something other than meat and potatoes?
I mean, not really, but I'm a big fan of meat and potatoes. Bangers and mash was something that I discovered in Ireland, and to this day might be one of my favorite foods. If it's on a menu at any restaurant I go to, I have a really hard time passing it up. Bangers, for anyone who doesn't know, are special Irish sausage. They are not the, might I say, gross blood sausage. I know that some people like that and it's a cultural thing, but I was not a fan. I did try it, but no thank you. I'll pass. But bangers and mash, so good. Guinness stew, amazing. Cottage pie, shepherd's pie. Yes, so many meat and potatoes, but you can't go wrong. I love it. So, but then there are so many pubs and cute little cafes and everything, and that was probably my favorite food experience, was like going into the pubs at night and there's live music, there's like an ocarina, I think that's the technical term of one of the instruments, but just getting a drink, getting some food, having some good conversation, listening to the music, it's just like the classic Irish experience. I feel like you always hear about that. So a couple of our favorites, Blueberry Cafe in Donegal, and then Granny Annie's in Derry, which I talked about with the hurling finals. But there were so many other great pubs that we went to, like O'Neill's in Dublin, and there were just some awesome ones in Ennis specifically. I can't remember the name of the pub itself, but so many cute little pubs, and explore the towns too. The towns are just so cute.
Yeah, I think the pubs and all these unique restaurants are things that make Ireland uniquely Irish. And there's so many other things that make Ireland uniquely Irish, like the 50 Shades of Green. I mean, it is astonishing how many different shades of green you can see. I feel like once you leave Ireland, you're still seeing green for the next week because that's all that's like ingrained in your head. It's just green, green, green,
It's
which is
so
absolutely
true.
beautiful. Yeah, it's so beautiful, and you don't get sick of it really, surprisingly.
No, I mean, there were so many hikes that we went on that just like up to a waterfall or around a garden or something. And it's like you don't get sick of it. It's just
Hmm.
gorgeous. There were like a couple hikes we went on. There was one where there were these fairy houses hidden, and there was this beautiful moss covered bridge that was just, I thought a troll was going to pop out at any second. It was just so beautiful. So yeah, totally. The green everywhere and like the manicured tree tunnels that are, oh my goodness. It's just, they take such good care of their country.
Yeah, and even like they have awards for tidy town awards, and I think that is just so special. Like I've never heard of that before. So I think that's really unique and something I kind of wish we had here in the US because maybe people would take better care of their towns and their communities and their own properties.
Yeah, agreed. And also, speaking of agreed, like their language is just so fun. Like instead of having a sold sign on a house, it would be sale agreed. Like, how cute is that?
It's so proper.
I know. I love it so much. Oh my gosh.
So I think that about wraps up Ireland. Anything else before we sign off?
I don't think so. I think that's it. But I hope you all get a chance to experience the wonder that is the Emerald Isle someday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. Come escape with us again every other Tuesday. Give us a subscribe and a follow on all of our social media and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And until we chat next time, wander on.